Any questions that I can handle tonight? In the back, yes.
Just out of curiosity, being kind of a geeky person, what particular audio codec do you use for EchoLink?
Okay, the question is, being a geeky person, what audio codec does EchoLink use? EchoLink uses GSM 6.1, which is a linear predictive coding codec, which is designed specifically for speech. It samples audio at 8,000 hertz, which is pretty narrow. This was designed for use in a telephone system, and I thought that would be a fairly good fit. Actually, the original choice was made by iLink, which predates EchoLink. Some of the other VoIP systems use ADPCM and are able to get a broader audio bandwidth. Some people think it sounds better. For example, ARRL uses ADPCM. I experimented with ADPCM on EchoLink, and in a trial run, found that most people couldn't tell the difference. So for the sake of simplicity, it stays at GSM 6.1. Yes, sir.
We have a couple of people at the club that have asked the question, what if they forget their EchoLink password?
What if they forget their EchoLink password?
Yeah.
So if you go to the EchoLink website, www.echolink, oh, look at this right there, /validation, on the validation pages, there's a function there that says request password reminder. And as long as your email address hasn't changed since you signed up, it will send a password reminder to your email address. Now, if your email address has changed and you've forgotten your password, there's no way for us to validate you. So you basically have to go through the validation process again, if both of those two things are true.
In other words, sign up again. And then...
Well, you're still signed up, but there's a special path you can go through. Excuse me, it'll explain the steps on the website, but you need to provide proof of license again. Yeah. Yes, sir.
The EchoLink interface, is that a piece of hardware? Or...
The question is the EchoLink interface a piece of hardware? Yes, it is. And I have some examples of them on the table in the back. Basically, it's usually a pretty simple device which connects to the serial port. Did we lose the back? Oh, there it is. Which connects to the serial port of the PC. And again, for those of you between the age of 30, PCs used to have serial ports to connect to modems. PCs used to have serial ports, but now you can, well, with virtually any PC, you can use a USB to serial adapter. So serial ports are almost still standard. But typically that connects between the serial port of the PC and the microphone, speakers, and PTT connection of the transceiver. Yeah. Yes, sir.
Yeah, you showed the ARRL being squeezed down into a Raspberry Pi.
Yeah.
Are there plans to port EchoLink so it also run on a Raspberry Pi?
So EchoLink does run on a Raspberry Pi, or an EchoLink compatible node will, if you run Echo IRLP on a Raspberry Pi. That's my recommended approach. That way you're not getting yourself into trying to run Windows on a Raspberry Pi. So I think that's the best way to go. Is if you want a real small node, is use set up RLP on it and add the Echo RLP scripts. You're all set. Yes, sir.
Right now you're using PTT for transmit control on the radio. What about using box control on the radio instead?
So the question is, well, how about using box control instead of, or in addition to PTT? Box is an option if the radio supports Vox on input, and I don't think most FM rigs do. But if it does, you can select that option in the configuration.
Both banks do, for example.
Do they? Okay. Pointed out that both things do. So yeah, if you have a radio that supports Vox, but let me point out one limitation of that. The problem with Vox control of the transmitter is you can't transmit silence. And the problem with that is that you sometimes will get the beginning of the transmission cut off. And there's very little that EchoLink can do about that if the only control it has over the radio is Vox. There's been various suggestions like subaudible tones or something to use that to trigger the Vox. And by the way, this is a limitation of the signal link interface if you use a signal link. The signal link, and there's one of them back there, is basically a sound card, a remote sound card that plugs into your USB port. And it's completely Vox controlled for transfer. It's very easy to set up because of that, but it has that limitation as far as that goes. It wasn't designed for FM. I'm
The
sorry.
person speaking stops, it knocks off, on and off on the radio.
Right, so if there's a pause in a conversation, it could drop. And the other problem is that when EchoLink tries to send a voice or Morse ID, the beginning of it can get cut off, can get clipped because of that. Yes, sir.
I use EchoLink on the Android phone. And if I get a phone call while I'm on EchoLink, I answer the phone call. When I come back to EchoLink, I have very, very low audio. And the only way, there must be a setting that I don't know about. I go back out and start all over again.
Interesting. I think you found a bug that I didn't know about. The bug is that on EchoLink for Android, when a phone call comes in, it messes up the audio level when you go back to EchoLink. So EchoLink on an Android device, you might have seen the volume control. There's actually 4 or 5 different volume levels. There's like multimedia volume, there's phone volume. If you go in and look at that. EchoLink uses the telephony channel on Android as opposed to the multimedia channel. So any volume changes to the phone will apply to EchoLink and vice versa. And there must be some interaction between the two that's confusing. Any other questions?
On a Linux computer, is there an EchoLink application for Linux?
Is there an EchoLink for Linux? Years ago, somebody produced an open source package called EchoLinux. And it is based on the same code base that was used to produce the open source application called The Bridge, which is the software used to create EchoLink conference servers. There is also a compatible application called SBX Link, which is produced by an amateur in Sweden, which I've heard is a very good RF gateway edition of EchoLinux. However, I don't know of a Linux compatible, EchoLink compatible application that has a desktop interface.
Couldn't you just run that under Wine?
So the question is, can it run on Wine? Some people have had success on Wine, especially with later editions of Wine. I have not tried it in a few years, but I know some people are running that on Wine. Wine is sort of a Windows compatibility layer for Linux.
EchoLink's voice primarily, is there any application for data, for running any data modes?
So the question is, can you run data modes for EchoLink? This has been suggested. In fact, there's been some interest in, I don't know if you want to call it a data mode, a very simple data mode called CW. There's been some interest in various kinds of things riding on the EchoLink network. It is possible to send simple text messages back and forth as long as both ends of the conversation are on a PC. However, I sort of tried to shy away from trying to add additional modes to it because it really is a special purpose application for VoIP, thinking there's lots of other ways, much better ways, to exchange other modes of the internet. Is there another question?
Maybe to demystify something with the port business and all that.
Yeah.
We can make connections using our outgoing Wi-Fi or restricted Wi-Fi, but voice doesn't get passed. We've a number of us have experienced this, right, where we can connect to a distant node, an EchoLink node, but the voice doesn't. Is there? Can you briefly
So there's a couple of issues there. Let's see if I can sort of break that down. The question essentially is there are situations where you can connect, but no voice is heard. No voice is heard. The two ports that EchoLink uses, one of them is used for control and the other is used for voice. So it's entirely possible that because of some kind of a firewall or router configuration, one of them succeeded and the other one didn't. The other problem is that if your router has not been configured to correctly receive packets from the internet for EchoLink, a common problem is you're able to go out and can't hear back. It's like closing your ears. And the problem with that is that the other end thinks you're connected, but it doesn't look like you're connected from your end. So you get these sort of ghost connections. You might have heard this on your repeater sometimes. If somebody connects, you try to call them and they don't hear you. That may be what has happened in that case. Clearly that's something that could be improved, but again, it can be improved only at the expense of compatibility. So, yes, sir.
If you had to put a description of EchoLink into 1 or 2 sentences for somebody off the street, well, how would you describe it?
So this is what you would call the elevator pitch, right? EchoLink is a system for allowing amateur radio stations to connect to each other over the internet. Now, somebody on the street might not fully understand. Of course, they might not understand the term amateur radio. But that is sort of the succinct description of the system. It allows amateur radio stations, which could be an individual or a repeater, stations to connect to each other over the internet. That's about the best I could do, I think.
In other words, it's like, say, transceiver to transceiver over the internet, so to speak.
Yes, that's right. So you're extending the capabilities that you normally have by connecting stations to each other over the internet to enhance the capabilities of amateur radio. Yes, sir.
Here's the, I remember when I signed up years ago that I used Logbook of the World to verify because I didn't have a credit card at the time. Is that still on?
Oh, great question. Excellent question. There used to be more different ways to authenticate yourself to EchoLink. For example, at one time, there was an IVR set up so you could actually do telephone authentication. Some of those have been phased out. One of the methods that we did support for a while was the Logbook of the World. We signed up for how many of you have signed up for the Logbook of the World? So the Logbook of the World uses a digital certificate method of authentication. You sign up for the Logbook of the World, I guess you send a copy of your license to ARRL, I think, and they will issue you a digital certificate, which gets installed into your LFTW software. And thinking that that would be the new digital ID card for amateur radio, for a while EchoLink also supported that same certificate. So you could use that same certificate to authenticate yourself to EchoLink. I think there wasn't a lot of interest in it, so it eventually dropped support for it because it required updating the key ring so often. But so the short answer is no, it's no longer supported. I'm not saying it never will be, but right now it's not. Thank you very much for listening. It's been a pleasure.
On behalf of FairlawnARC.org, we'd like
Sure. And I almost forgot that I set up an EchoLink node here to do a demo. I guess we could do a demo. I work in the IT industry, and years ago somebody gave me a piece of advice. It's like, Jonathan, never do a live demo on a wireless network.
In front of people.
So in front of people. So with that sage advice in mind, I'm about to do a demo on a wireless network in front of a lot of people. So, I'm just going to look up something here.
Being recorded.
Okay, so my pal Terry out in Sydney, Australia, it looks like he's not awake currently. That's what I'm connected to. But what this demo consists of is a ThinkPad laptop connected to a TMV71 Kenwood rig. Remember, that's the one that has the built-in sound card interface. The special cables are connected. And it's tuned to 446.5 UHF simplex frequency. And the typical way to use EchoLink if you're a mobile or portable station, and by the way, if you're a mobile or portable station, you don't need to sign up for EchoLink. As long as you have permission to use the EchoLink node on your arrangement, you just need to know how to operate it. It's operated using DTMF commands, touchtone digits. So you simply identify and then type in the node number of the remote station you want to connect to. If you used EchoLink, you probably know that the Echo test server is 9999, so just do something. This is K1RFD.
Connecting to conference ECHOTEST. Connected.
You might recognize the voice.
Test server. This server records your transmissions and plays them back to help you adjust your feel free to connect as often as you like.
So this is the first step if you set up an EchoLink node, is connect to the test server. If you can't connect to the test server, you're not going to be able to connect to anybody else. So make sure this is working first. That's the purpose of the test server. It's just running in the cloud in Northern California. You can just do, this is a test to the test server, 1, 2, 3, 4. It'll just record what you say and play it back to you.
This is a test to the test server, 1, 2, 3, 4.
Just to make sure your levels are set in both directions, right? Because the PC sound card levels need to be set right. The biggest problem with audio quality in EchoLink is that people don't have their levels set correctly. So it's very important to get that right. Now I happen to be in front of the laptop, so my options for connecting to another station are I can either just reach over and use the keyboard, or I can enter the DTMF. Does anybody know the node number of your EchoLink node?
I do, but it's not running right now.
There actually is a way to look up a node number using the touchtone commands.
Yes, it's 300501.
300501. Well, we need to get you a shorter one. This is good. I forgot that I was still on the test server.
Conference ECHOTEST disconnected.
300501.
Correct.
Okay, I need to do a little bit of level adjustment also. One of the things that's very sensitive in the EchoLink software is the DTMF decoder, which is done in software. If you have a hardware DTMF decoder, your levels are much less critical. And since I'm using this style of interface, I'm using the internal decoder in the software. And I need to do a little bit more work setting levels. So it's able to decode the higher tones, but not the lower tones. So, that piece of it will be adjusted. Anyway, this is the brief setup. We can also connect directly this way, of course. W2NPT. Okay, so congrats to whoever set up the RF node, the EchoLink node. So it sounds like it's properly set up. It's not sending squelch tails and courtesy tones back through, so that's great.
It works beautifully. We use it every Monday night on our net.
That's good.
Who's running that right now?
Congratulations. I'll disconnect.